And here we are. Hello. Pavel, I'm not sure I have sound on your side. Can you say something, please? I can, but other people wouldn't hear you. Just a moment, please. More fixes. And now?
Should I say something else?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Hello, this is iBookBinding's live stream, and today we have Hannah Brown as our guest, a bookbinder from the United Kingdom, and we already had Hannah on our podcast a year ago or something like that, quite some time ago. But I hope we will discuss much more today. So, hi, Hannah. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Yeah, our pleasure. And Pavel is continuing to move around Europe. So where are you, Pavel, right now?
I'm currently in Sofia, Bulgaria, for a couple of months. So the next 5 or 6 streams will come from here.
Okay.
Hannah asked me if I took my plants with me. No, unfortunately, my 40 or so friends had to go, but I have new ones, so...
Okay, I hope you found new homes for your 40 friends.
Sure.
Because I've been walking around on our stairway in our building for several weeks, and there was a lonely plant standing near the garbage shaft. I don't know how it's called in English. And it was losing its leaves week after week, and I was like, should I take it home? Is it someone's? What's happening here? And it was such a sad picture. But yeah, and I'm not the best plant caretaker person, so probably it would die anyway if I took it. Today we're going to talk about fine binding, about embroidery in bookbinding, and Hannah is going to make a workshop tour for us because she has a new studio, at least since our last talk. I think it's not a new studio anymore because you've been working there for quite some time already. When did you start working there? When did you open it?
Yeah, I can tell you pretty much exactly, and I know why. Is because when we spoke last, I was in one of the spare bedrooms on the top floor of the house, which is where the new studio is too. Because we had to shift my old studio was in the adjoining room to what is now the new studio, and in order to get the new studio done, I had to shift everything out of there. So we have two bedrooms on the top floor of the house, one of which had literally all the furniture in it from all the other bedrooms, and then the room I was working had the furniture from what was my old studio in it. So that was the last podcast we did, and it was June last year that I officially moved in here, and that's because we had house guests and we needed the bedroom. So that was the push I needed to shift everything back into the studio space. So it was a bit makeshift for a few weeks, well, probably a few months really, before I was sort of able to really kind of, lay everything out where I wanted it and so forth. And I think it was November last year, we had the decorators in, so all the cabinets were painted. And so really, I'd say it's probably kind of towards the beginning of this year that I felt more like at home here, where I want it to be, and it's the color I want it to be. And so phase 2 will be sorting out what was my old studio, which is, as I say, is adjoining. It's got my plan chest in it. But it's still got a lot of sort of still got a lot of the sort of floor panels and things that we're going to use up in the loft, sort of attic space. So at the moment it's kind of a bit of a junkyard in there. But I can't complain because I've got a lovely space to use, and it's bright and airy, and it's a lovely place to hide away from life
I'm so envious.
Yeah.
And have you already had any classes there?
So I have. I teach regularly on a Monday morning for 3 hours. So I've got 2 students that have been with me loyally for the last probably about 3 years now. So we all used to sort of squash into my old studio room, which was absolutely fine. And they were very patient, and they continued coming when the building work was going on, and we were in the temporary room, and that worked fine, although it was quite dark. And so it's been wonderful to welcome them in here. And so the central island that you can see behind me is where my students sit. So they get a nice sort of tall bench space. And then when they're not here, I sort of explode onto the central bench for the rest of the week. And then on a Sunday night, I'm like, they're coming again on Monday morning. So have a bit of a clear up in advance. But in fact, actually, I quite like that routine. I like having that sort of regular Monday morning where I sort of feel I have to be on top of things again, because otherwise, I don't know what everyone else's workspace is like. I feel like my sort of brain gets a bit confused if I've got things everywhere. So I quite like putting my tools away and then getting them out again for the next week. So that seems to be the way that I work working week.
And what is it you teach exactly?
So on a Monday morning, the 2 students, they bring along their own projects. So it's sort of what they need help with at the time. So I'm teaching a bit of stud binding, sort of leather onlays, pairing, sort of fine binding techniques. And then additionally to that, so far, I've done 1 class for a charity for carers based in Bath. And there were 6 participants, and they came and spent the afternoon here, and we made a little simple softback paper notebook. But it was a good test case for how many people you can sort of work in the studio. So there were 6 for that. There were due to be 8, but 2 had to drop out. But I think I could comfortably teach 8 in the studio if we weren't, they didn't need to move around too much. So each person had their kit in front of them. Whereas obviously if you're doing fine binding work, you sort of need to be going over to the board chopper and then do the pairing. So I think for that I'd be able to have less people.
8 is quite a lot. In my experience, when you're getting closer to 8, 10 or more, you definitely start to need a helper there.
Yeah, that's true. I think for that, because it was all sort of, a handout sheet and the kit in front of them, I just about managed. But yeah, I think 8's the cap, really. Yeah. So I think, 6 to 8 really in the space. And actually for the Society Bookbinders, in October, I'm doing a course on inlays, onlays and scarf jointing. So that will be sort of 6 or 7 people in the studio. And that's a rerun of a course I did about 3 years ago for the Society.
So we have already some comments and questions from our regulars. So on Facebook, Timothy from Vietnam joined us. Hi there. And there is real LWG. Hello from Lancaster, United Kingdom. And there's a question there. Are the students on sitting guilds or direct from university or college? And that's I can't even understand the question. I understand all the words, but I don't understand the meaning. But hopefully Hannah will be able to answer it.
So the students, I'm guessing maybe they're referring to the Monday students, and they're not from a City and Guilds course, or it's they're hobby binders really, so they're doing it sort of as a hobby. They both have jobs, and this is sort of a sideline that they do for fun. And the class that I'm doing for the Society Bookbinders, again, it's for members of the Western region. So the Society Bookbinders is split in different regions around the country. country. Obviously, you can go to a course in a different region, but it's going to be further from where you live. So the courses I'm doing, they're not sort of sort of officially for City and Guilds or anything like that. They're just sort of for people that want to learn sort of a specific skill. Does that answer the question?
Hopefully. I think we should probably ask you to tell us where exactly in the United Kingdom you're located. So
okay, sure. So being in the Western region, obviously I'm west of the United Kingdom. So I live in a town called Shepton Mallet, which is probably about half an hour from Bath and about an hour from Bristol. We're very close to the city of Wells, which is 5 miles down the road. And it's about sort of three hours drive to London from here, east. So that helps geographically.
yeah. Well, I'm sure it will help our viewers from the United Kingdom. For everybody else, it's west from London.
Yeah.
We also have Patrizia Vignoli. Hi from Bologna. Hi, Patrizia. And we really like people telling us where they join. Us from. And I wanted to ask you to talk a bit more about your work with charities. What kind of charities are they, and what is it that you teach them generally, and what do you personally get from it?
So the class I did for the carers charity in Bath was, they contacted me because I did the same notebook workshop in Shepton Mallet, and they thought that would appeal to their members. So it was all women who came, and they are long-term carers, so they've got family or friends who require sort of, they have health issues or disabilities, so they spend sort of 24/7 caring for their loved one. So they try and put on events, albeit bookbinding workshop that I did, or other things, sort of trips out for their members, so they can have a day away from their caring duties. So that was the work I did for that particular one. The Society of Bookbinders additionally is a charity. It's a charity in the UK, and it's for the promotion of bookbinding. So they have a biannual conference, which I've just been to actually, which was meant to happen the year before, but because of COVID, it was postponed. So that is happened in Bath, so not too far from here, and I did a presentation there about, I'm not sure how many people are aware of the work I do for my fine bindings, but I make a sample board for each of the fine bindings I do. So I did a presentation about that,
and we discussed this matter at length during our podcast recording. So if anyone is interested to hear more in detail, Pavel posted a link in the comment section, so you can watch it after we finish our live stream.
Sure. And additionally, actually, because I spent a fair while kind of preparing for the presentation, and it was over quite quickly. I mean, we did 2 sessions. I've actually written it as a blog post on my own website. If anyone's interested in reading it, they can.
Okay. We also have another regular on Facebook. Yael Tal joins us from Australia. So yeah, people from all over the globe are with us today. So do you have any of the recent bindings to show us, or something, or would you prefer with the workshop tour? How would you prefer to proceed? My computer at the moment is on my new Piccadilly press from Olive and Oak, so it's on casters, so I can actually move the computer to the studio, which might help actually, because I have laid a few things out on the middle bench. So maybe I can wheel the. Don't know if there are questions about the studio, or obviously I can't show the Piccadilly press because the computer's on it. But definitely, if anyone has any questions about about the studio, about the workshop equipment and stuff, please post them, and we'll try to answer them.
So, well, I can wheel around the studio and explain a little bit about, so the studio space itself, the house that I live in, dates back to probably early 1700, so it's very old. And the history of the area that I live in is it was all mill buildings. So they produced wool here, and then later they produced silk. There's a little river running along down the bottom of our road that powered the mills. So the house itself, I don't believe would have had it would have been more for the production of the wool and silk. So the studio area, we think, would have been attached to a large mill building, which is no longer here. And so there's, a lot of history. We have had surveys of the house done. They've done the whole of the area, and they've written a big book about it all, which is quite a lot to digest, but really an interesting thing to have available. So the space itself, before we turned it into the studio, was completely sort of not usable. It's on the top, same level as the top floor of the house, but we had a little hatched door that led into it. And the floor of this room was just the ceiling of the rooms below, so you couldn't put any weight on it.
Oh, yeah.
So the actual floor of the studio has gone up probably by 1.5 feet, because they had to put a big supporting beam in, which additionally supports the pole you see in the middle of the room and the new truss.
Yeah.
So I'll spin it around. So you see this original truss here. The ceiling level was to this height. So this beam has been totally sheared and cut, and is now reinforced by this new roof truss. So we went right up into the eaves of the space. So nice and tall here. And if I move around a little bit more. So I've got some really nice features in the room. Because the area we live in is all listed, it's grade 2 listed, so any change you make to your house has to go through sort of, all these checks and so forth, and planning. So we thought, well, we'll ask for as many windows as we might be allowed, sort of presuming that actually we wouldn't be allowed them all.
But maybe they will allow at least something.
We're allowed them all. So the window you see behind me was always there, but it was bricked up. So the original stone mullions were a bit damaged, so they've been repaired, and we've had this new stained glass put in. So the stained glass was done by one of our neighbours who lives literally across the road from us. And yeah, we're really pleased with it. It had to be obscured glass, so you can't see through it because it looks down into the neighbour's property. And additionally, I don't know if you can see it from here, but there's a matching one, a bit bright up.
Yeah, it's a bit too bright.
Yeah,
but at least we can see the shades of color there.
Yeah, exactly. It looks exactly the same. The window I'm pointing at now used to be a door. We're not quite sure into what, but it was, although it was a door, it had been bricked up into a window which was smaller than the one you see now. So we've opened it up into sort of a larger space. It had to have a new lintel across the top, like a sort of beam to support it. And then the window, I'll just take you around.
So probably a door into a next building or something like that?
Yes, exactly, because that would have been where the next building was. And the window you see here, which looks onto the front of the house, there was nothing there, no window, just a wall. And actually, when you look at our house from the front, it looks strange. It looked like there should have been a window here. So we applied for planning permission to put a window in, thinking we probably wouldn't be allowed because it changes the look of the front of the house, and they seem to be a bit funny about that. But fortunately, it was allowed. But I don't know how clearly you can see. Again, it's stone mullions. So these stone mullions, we had a drawing made up. There's a window exactly the same on the floor below, directly beneath this. We had a drawing made up of that window, and this was made by a local quarry to the exact same spec as the window below. So with the same sort of dimensions of the window frames and everything. So we're really pleased we got that one in, because I think that makes the studio and makes the front of the house as well. So if I just wheel you back again.
So you have a person who makes stained glass windows over there nearby your bookbinder. Do you have any other artisans in the area?
Oh, there's all sorts in Shepton, actually. It's quite a creative town.
Could you please raise the camera just a bit? Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
It's a very creative town. And yeah, there's all sorts of artisans around. I can't think of any offhand, but yes, there are. Not just me. And yeah, while I was in this corner, I was just going to show, as part of the studio build, I knew I was going to have a very, very heavy board chopper up here. So actually during the build, the floor was reinforced in that corner for them, because I didn't want it going through the floor.
I think it was a whole story. And
sorry, and I saw a wonderful photograph of before and after on your Instagram. I'll post it for our viewers in the comments. So it was quite a project, I have to say.
This is, sorry, getting the board chopper into the studio. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
No. I mean the before and after of what it looked before, and you'd never guess that you could get such an idyllic place in there. And the chopper probably weighs what, a couple 100 kilos?
No, more like a ton. No.
Yeah, half a ton, I think. It was. So yeah, it was necessary. But yes, it was a big project, and I'm pleased that this room is usable now, given it really wasn't before.
Yeah, I think you also posted the story of moving the board chopper to its new place as well on your Instagram, for sure.
That's right. So yeah, I employed a company called AMR Press, who are sort of specialists at moving printing equipment, and knew exactly what they were doing. So the board chopper I'd had stored in the garage, down obviously just across the road from us. We have a garage. It's a really horrible dank. It needs sort of sorting out. So I was really worried because we had all stuff piled up in front of it. So I had no idea what was happening to it. It was under plastic. I was thinking, oh gosh, it's rusting away. And so I'm really pleased now to have it up here, but they had to take it all apart and they reconditioned it. And actually part of it, the backstop, which would sort of go on the board chopper here with a little wheel, had sheared in the middle. So that's being repaired at the moment. But it still functions without it. But I'll be pleased to get that back soon.
It's interesting that companies like that still continue to exist in the United Kingdom, because I understand that it's an issue in many countries and many regions that companies who used to support printing, old style printing industry, bookbinding, and other things like that are just fading away. And I've been talking to Ben Elbel some time ago when I visited his studio last time, and he showed me he had I think it was a book sewing machine or something like that, and he explained to me that he had to invite a repairman from Belgium or something like that. So he has to pay for 2 hours driving to him, then works, then 2 hours driving back. So it's a lot of additional expenses if you want to repair a machine like that.
Yeah, definitely.
How is it in the UK with that stuff?
Yeah, well, I've obviously employed these, AMR Press, who actually they've, if anyone's interested, they have an Instagram account and they sort of seem to go all over the place. They're busy because they're good. That's the thing. I think when I made the appointment, it was sort of a few months on, sort of that they were available to come to me, but that was fine. And you know, they're specialists in their field, and I suppose like anything that you try and get sort of done, it's sort of almost reassuring if someone's busy, because it means that actually hopefully they're kind of in demand. And I mean, I haven't got much that needs sort of maintaining. I haven't got a sort of print studio or anything like that. I do remember when before this board shopper came up here, I needed the man I bought it off. He kept it for a while until I had the space in the garage to move it into. The blade itself really needed sharpening, because it had sort of pits out of it. And actually finding someone to, less so the straight blade on the bottom, but the curved blade, it was really hard to find someone that would sharpen something so big. So in the end, I found a company in Bristol, but they had to post it up to their sort of partner company in Scotland for the curved blade to be sharpened, which was then posted back to me. And actually, I've got a nice sort of, they made a nice box for it to go in. It was, so now, which I've kept, if it needs sharpening again, I've got something sort of ready, sort of purpose made for it to sit in, to post it back to be sharpened again.
Nice. I thought that with at least with sharpening it should be easier, because at least there are lots of carpenters and woodworkers who also need to sharpen their tools. However, with the curved blades, it may be not as easy.
Yeah, and I think it's just the size of the curved blade. I mean, it's sort of, you know, almost a meter long. So I suppose, yeah. Maybe people have got suggestions of it elsewhere. I can send it next time. I don't know, but at least I have contact.
In Russian language, these sort of curved knives or curved cutters are called saber cutters. So, well, obviously because of the curved shape, but yeah. And so we have some more comments on YouTube. Alonso Rojas Dere says hello. And Real LWD, again, another question. Do you plan to use embroidery thread dyed with natural dyes like wood, weld, or madder, or mushroom dyes? I guess we can keep this question for a bit later part of our talk, when we move to embroidered bindings, but we'll keep it in mind.
So sorry, you'd like me to answer? Yeah.
Maybe a bit later. If you have any other parts of workshop to show us, let's finish with workshop, and then we will move to embroidered bindings.
Again. So in this corner, I have a sink.
That's a nice wall there.
Yeah. So I'm very excited to have a sink, because I didn't in my other studio, my old room next door, and my brushes used to just sit there and I'd forget about them, and then they'd be dry, you know. But actually having a sink right next to you is sort of, you know, easier to get into the habit of actually cleaning out things.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was really lucky, actually.
Do you have plumbing wide enough for all the glue stuff to go through, or you have to, you know? When I was studying in the United States, in the American Academy of Bookbinding, they asked us to remove all the glue with paper towels first, and only then wash the brushes or something like that. So do you have to do anything like that?
Usually, I mean, I use a roller tray, usually for sort of doing large scale stuff. So I usually, you know, if that's nearly gone, I'll just let it dry out and then peel it out rather than washing it down the sink. Otherwise, it's just tiny brushes. So, you know, often I'm using paste anyway. Which is,
it's much better for plumbing. Yeah.
Exactly, flour and water. So yeah, I was lucky. Well, it was quite a crazy year last year, because as well as the studio space being done, we had our kitchen renovated. But it was actually very good timing, because it meant I could use all the old units in the studio. So this unit you see with the sink in it used to be in our kitchen downstairs. We've repainted it. And the central bench that you can see here, the bench top here, was actually meant to be in the new kitchen, but we ordered it slightly the wrong size, too small. I was like, it's fine. I need a bench space. I need a bench top upstairs. So actually that worked out quite well for me. I probably got a much nicer bench top up here than I otherwise would have done. So that worked well.
Nice.
And yeah, the pegboards you see behind were fortuitously exactly the right width for the cupboard doors that we put in. So I'll just wheel you
Oh, it's a cupboard.
It's a cupboard with boilers inside. So
that's smart.
Yeah. So it was lucky that I could put those there without having to trim them down, because they were up in my old studio on the wall instead. So I just find it useful to have the equipment sort of on this board. I mean, I've still got drawers with tools in, but the things I use the most are on here, so they're easy grab for day-to-day use. And on the top, I have sewing machines, light boxes, and everything. And then my sort of desk that I generally sit at is this one here, which has a nice sort of view into the studio. So I can sort of sit there and sort of jump up and down when my students need me for something or other. So that's the other angle. So the archway you now see was opened up. So it's an original archway, and we kept some of the bricks exposed on the top, which you might just be able to see, to show that it sort of always was an archway. We didn't just sort of choose to put one in for a visual effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's some steps down into, that was my old studio room. So that's open at the moment. And there's sort of an overspill for my plan chest, which I wouldn't really be able to fit in here. I mean, I would if I tried, but I don't, I can have all my storage down in that room, which is helpful away from everything else. Because although plan chests are great, and I could have used one in the middle of the room, you can't then get your legs onto the bench.
Yeah.
Sitting at them. So that was, yeah, I found I've got 2 plan chests actually, which might seem excessive, but I sort of feel you can never have too many drawers for things.
I agree. Absolutely agree.
You get that bit of paper that's at the bottom of the stack. And so, yeah, I'm pleased to have 2. It's helpful.
And have you designed the space yourself based on your previous experience, or did you have some outside influences or help? Because it looks really interesting, like sort of an open kitchen, and you can clearly go around and help everyone and see everything. So then this is the first studio like that we've seen. It's a very interesting space.
Yeah, so I think really it's sort of just the layout was very much dependent upon this pole I've got in the middle. So because the pole had to be there, it just totally made sense to sort of encompass that pole with bench space, so that, it's in the center of the room anyway. In some ways, it's frustrating the pole's there, because if I've ever got anything really big to lay out, the pole's in the way. But I've got additional, the bench on the far side, the white top there with the stools underneath is movable.
Mm-hmm.
So I can, and it's the same height. So everything's the same height. So I can move that to be part of the central area. So that gives me a bit more space if I need it. Which was, because I did a project recently for Suntup Editions, which was multiples of books, which is the first project I've done when there was multiple things.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was especially useful to be in this studio doing that project, because I could spread everything out, which I wouldn't have been able to do so easily in the old space. So it's, I'm really, I'm really lucky to have a nice space to work in. I don't want to take it for granted.
And it looks like you already had a lot of chances to enjoy this new space in all its ways of use.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, things have shifted around. It hasn't. I mean, the bench has always been in the central area, but I've shifted my workspace around, and you know, I think I probably will continue to do so until I get it just right. And I bought some the new stools on the back because it was useful to have them that they could stack if I didn't need them all, and you know, small things like that over time. I'll sort of the thing actually, one thing I wanted to mention actually was the walls of the studio are all, because it's a listed building, they're all covered in lime plaster, which is not just like conventional plaster in a sort of modern house, it's sort of breathable. And so I can't really have anything up on the walls because I don't want to sort of drill into them at all, apart from sort of a little bit of shelving here and there. But it all had to be carried up here. So there was 4.5 tons of plaster on the walls of this studio, which had to be carried up by hand 2 flights of stairs over the course of 4 weekends. So that was hard work. I mean, we didn't put it on the walls ourselves, but we did carry it up here. So that, that was quite.
But it does seem to make for a lighter space. The light is very diffuse in there. It's probably very good for your work.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually, although I've got, you know, I do like little things. So I've got these, you know, the old printers trays, which you can see everywhere now with my little things in it. But generally having the walls nice and plain, it just feels more open in here.
I also wanted to mention that Pavel told that we have never seen anything like that, like your studio with access from all the sides. Firstly, obviously, in schools you can see areas like that, but that's not a school. It's a personal studio which is also used for teaching, so it's a bit different. But then, for example, in Mark Cochrom's studio, you can also see something like that, but it's also much more cramped in there. not so much space to walk around.
You can't tell the shape of his studio. I mean, it's more of a maze. But...
What is quite nice actually about having the central bench is that all the students are facing each other, so they can sort of see what everyone else is doing as well, which I think is quite a nice thing.
Also with the limescape plaster, I remember that I watched a bunch of episodes with the Restoration Man, this UK series, when they take old houses and follow the restoration process. So they talk about limescape plaster quite a lot there. And if anybody is interested, just search for Restoration Man on YouTube, and you will find at least some mentions of the process and how it works. that's a whole other story, of course. So yeah, that's a great space. Thank you for showing it to us.
And congratulations.
And congratulations. Yeah.
Well, I have to use it now. I have to make the most of spending all this time sort of getting it to how I want it. I feel like I should be up here every single second of my spare time, just using it.
I'm not sure if I asked you the last time we talked on our podcast, but we asked this question a lot especially with our British guests. Do you have any thoughts about getting an apprentice or something like that?
Well,
especially for a larger space like that.
Yeah, interestingly, I was contacted recently by someone who is very likely in December to come and join me for a few months. I'm not going to say any more right now because it's not, it's not sort of finalized. But I had a chat with her on Friday, and actually I realized, so I had an email a couple of weeks ago sort of expressing interest in being an intern or an apprentice for me, and she'd contacted me also additionally back in 2020, very early on, and obviously then everything sort of went wrong with COVID.
With everything, yeah.
Yeah, so it had just come at the right time, and I was sort of thinking how it would be nice to have some additional sort of help with some of my workload, because of last year with everything that went on with the studio build, I'm a little bit behind with projects. And she additionally wants to learn about leatherwork, which I can teach her. And she will bring her in projects to do. So yes, that will be perhaps a conversation for another time. But yes, it was interesting you asked, because I think that is going to happen.
Well, all the best to both of you, or to all of you, and that's an interesting move forward. I also remember that during our last talk, we discussed that with your bindings, when you make wooden boxes for them, you ask another person to do them. So I guess that's another artisan who is in the area around you,
Well,
or they are not
yeah,
close to you.
no, he doesn't live near me, actually.
Okay.
So although I have visited him before, it's not. Yeah, I have actually used, when he was out of action for a little while. So I did use a different carpenter who did live near me, but he did more kind of sort of building wardrobes and things, less fine work. So I've gone to the original craftsman I was using before, and he is a good person, very good person to know, because his work's incredible. So I'm lucky. In an ideal world, I'd love to have a woodworking machinery here too, because so I could my own boxes, but I think you've got to draw the line somewhere.
Well, you can rebuild the next building, rebuild the door, and have a woodworking workshop there.
So I think, yeah, there's really a limit to time. Time is my biggest sort of is the thing I just don't have enough of, really, with the young children and everything else going on. So you've got to accept that it's useful to have people who are skillful in other areas to help you out.
That's true. So we will also have Berfu Nakar from Turkey joining us, another regular guest of our live streams. Hi there. Nice to have you here. And should we move forward to some bindings, or are you ready to talk about your project?
I will move around to where I've got a few things out. We'll get a little... So I mentioned before the meeting started, I mentioned to Pavel and Stefan that I'm currently working on, well, it's actually 3 books and sample boards for 3 books. I can't really show them at the moment because the clients haven't seen them, but I can show what they're for. So one of the books I'm working on is Matilda, which is actually a really fun one, and actually I am quite excited about the design for that. It's a bit different to what I've done before. The thing with Matilda, when I was asked to do Matilda, I obviously read Matilda when I was younger, and actually at this point in time, my eldest daughter's 7 and she's reading Roald Dahl books. She's really good at reading, and we've watched the film recently. So although I find actually watching film doesn't help, because it sort of takes your mind off the actual book. But anyway, the thing with Matilda is the Quentin Blake illustrations are so iconic. It's what design to do that still has the feeling of Matilda without trying to compete with those iconic illustrations. So I can't explain exactly now. There's going to be tiny little elements of Quentin Blake illustrations, but they won't overtake at all the whole design. And there's so many different parts of the story, which that's what I love about book binding, is the fact that the books are 3D objects and you've got so many different planes to play with. So not just the cover, but you've got sort of, the end papers and the doublures and the edge decoration, and the box for this one's going to be quite exciting too. It's not going to, it's going to be a wooden box, but with a bit of a difference. So that one I need to get my head around and do a drawing for. But it should, be a little bit different to the others.
So it's pretty much in works still, this project, with some details not fixed yet.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, all the details are fixed, but I just can't really explain that.
Okay. Maybe we should return to you in a couple of months and invite you for a shorter stay on our live stream for some half an hour or something, when the project is ready and you can show it to us.
I think that will be a fun one to show. So yes, of course.
Okay, let's do that. That was a teaser for everyone.
The second book that I have on the bench at the moment is I don't know if anyone knows it, is Giacomo Joyce, James Joyce, and I'm going to read you just from so this is James Joyce's shortest prose work, a finely written episode of fictionalized autobiography. Dealing with an illicit love affair, Giacomo Joyce was never published in Joyce's lifetime, possibly because he feared domestic repercussions. It is, though, a limpid and finished work of art. So it's basically a poem, and it's illustrated by a lady called Susan Weil. So the book itself is quite interesting. It's got lots of kind of cutouts, and I'll just try and find an interesting page to show you. So this one, for example, it's sort of like pierced pages.
Oh.
Very thick individual sections.
Interesting.
So that's going to be an interesting structure. I'm thinking of doing a stub binding for this.
And was it distributed in sections, or did you have to disassemble it first?
I disassembled it. So
okay.
The original cover, just a grey cloth cover.
And who's the publisher?
It's published by, I've never heard of them before, Vincent Fitzgerald and Company in 1989.
Because it is a complicated book to make, with all those.
So again, I can't go into the design for that one because it's still pending, but it's because of the nature of the pages and sort of lots of cutouts. I'm going to have sort of pierced boards with sort of that you can look through to sort of see the end papers, and again, so that'll be a fun one to do. So I'm just at the end of doing the sample board now. Just got a little bit printmaking to do for the reverse side of it. And then the third thing is a little miniature book for A Winter's Tale by Neil Albert in New York, a little miniature book that he's produced. He's got asked a number of binders to do a copy of the same book. So that is in motion as well, which will be nice and bright and colourful. I love colour, even if sort of it's subtle on the outside. I'll sort of make sure there's colour somewhere on the doublures or whatever. So that one is very colourful. So that's going to have a lot of embroidery work on it too. Well, all of them will have a lot of embroidery work. And then additionally, the last thing I'm working on at the moment, which is I'm having a go at making paper flowers.
Wow.
So this is a carnation. So this is just something a little bit different, which my friend got married this year, and for her wedding she wanted paper flowers. So she asked if I would help her out. So she came over in March, I think, armed with a book. I'll show you the book actually. The Fine Art of Paper Flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm experimenting at the moment with some of the techniques from in there, just because I think they're amazing.
It's fun. Yeah.
So they're all made from crepe paper. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on with all those sort of things that I'm juggling. And so just trying to do a lot of my embroidery work actually sort of in the evenings, sort of sitting in front of the telly actually, because I can sort of multitask. And especially now sort of winter's drawing in and there's sort of, you sort of want to hunker down a bit. I am sort of planning ahead sort of, so I've got the embroidery ready to go in the evenings. So I do sort of, I'm up here in the studio sort of the day when it's nice and light. And then I've sort of got my evening work, which I take downstairs to do as well. So today I'm going to be making up boards for each of these 3 bindings, and just trying to get on top of sort of paring some leather so that it's prepped to embroider.
We have Noelin Shaw, hi from Oxford NZ, I guess that's New Zealand, and yeah, a lot of people from the Eastern Hemisphere today, which is quite reasonable because we stream in the morning. I wanted to ask you a bit more about working on several projects at the same time, because I definitely know that there are bookbinders who prefer to focus on a single project because they don't want to, to scatter their mind over different aspects of different projects. But at the same time, I understand also from my personal experience that it may be much easier to work on several projects at the same time because you can plan your time much more efficiently. So what's your preferred pace?
Yeah, exactly what you just said, actually. I am doing these 3 projects at the same time. So I'm making all the boards at once today, and then I can do all the sewing of the books together. I'm not saying I do this all the time, but I think because I've had a whole summer off, pretty much having young children and they've been at home, and I was really excited to get back to the studio and work last week. I have decided that I'm going to trial doing more than one at once, so to see how it goes, we'll go from there really. Problem is I'm always really excited about every project I've got, so I'm sort of like, especially last week, I mean the studio looked like a bomb had hit it, so I was like, I've got to do this and I've got to do this and then I've got to do that. So yeah, I think I would say I'm probably always working on more than one thing at once. Certainly if it's not just a book, then it's sort of, I don't know, something else alongside a book. I think my brain works that way. I'm kind of excited. I go to bed at night and I'm like, oh, tomorrow I get to do whatever, embroider this, or I'm going to sort of pair that, and kind of quite look forward to the next day, which is the wonderful thing about being self-employed and enjoying what you do. Very lucky, really. Yeah. There are bits that I don't enjoy so much. I might think, oh, tomorrow I've got to sand those boards, or I've got to plough that book, or there are definitely bits of the process that are less enjoyable than others.
Yeah, it's definitely impossible to go through your craft doing only things you like. Well,
yeah,
I don't know anyone who's like that.
So, yeah. So I will spend today. I was going to do some printing this afternoon. So if I'm doing a bit of printing, then I'll, if I've got all that stuff laid out, it's sort of good to do, getting all paintbrushes and rollers dirty. I'll probably try and do more than one thing at the same time for that, or experiment a bit for something else, just because the time getting it all out and clearing it away, it sort of makes sense, I think.
So, what about some of your recent bookbinding projects with embroidery? Let's move to embroidery, because that's something you specialize in, and I guess that's something some of our guests would like to hear from you about.
Yeah. So, we could move. I could get I don't have the books. I don't have any books to show, unfortunately, because all the books I've got are the most recent book I've done.
We can probably open your Instagram in one of the windows here on our live stream, and then you'll be able
Or perhaps you have some of the boards you made.
Yeah, I do. I'll get those.
Yeah, even better.
So last time we talked about the boards, and the boards are the things you do in preparation for the bindings. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah. So this box here is some of the boards I've done. So the talk I did at the Society of Bookbinders Conference was about why I do the boards and why they're useful to me. And it was a really good opportunity to catalogue them all, which I'd not done before. You know, I make them, I put them in here, in random places on my computer. I had notes about this one and notes about that one. So now all sort of together and where I need it. And so going forward, once I finish a book, I know in my head I need to write down the size of that book, the publication details, etc., and I'll write a blog post, and then the board will get slotted into one of these slots. So I'll take out the three most recent to show you. So this board here is a bit different to the others. This was the board that I created for the Suntup Editions collaborative project that I did with Erin Fletcher recently. And in fact, it wasn't due to be a board, but I did a sample butterfly. You can see it. And thought, well, that has to go in. That has to go in my sample collection. So I've actually just riveted it to a piece of the tulip wood, which is what the boxes were made from. And that is sample board 62. So actually this one's interesting because you can see all the embroidery work on the back.
Yeah.
Don't often see, because obviously the leather's then stuck onto the inner board. So I wanted that to be visible for this. So actually that's
so it became a perfect addition to your board collection because it's different, but at the same time it sort of follows the same style and profile.
Yeah. Right. So that's, and then the one before, which you will have seen on Instagram, is the feathers, which were such fun to do. And actually I had done a board a few years ago with feathers, but it was a whole wing, which I again love doing. But these were especially intricate and work so well with the fine threads.
And these look like even more work than usual for you. It looks like a really complicated design.
And that's what I wanted to ask as well. How much time did you spend on making this board alone, and not mentioning the binding, or maybe the embroidery for the binding?
Yeah, I estimate that a board takes me probably 30 hours maybe to make, depending on the complexity of it. One I've just done recently sort of has a hinged element that's taken a bit longer because it was trying out something a bit different. You know, really is the extent of the embroidery and the level to which I'm sort of patterning. So this particular end paper, this was just rollered with some acrylic paint, you know, actually quite quick but quite effective, whereas some are more complicated than others on the reverse too. For example, the Terry Pratchett binding I did, which has a dragon on the front, the back, if you can just see, is a bookcase, which was incredibly time consuming to do.
It was also stitched, or it's painted, or what?
It's thin leather paired pieces.
Okay. So it's on lace.
On lace, and some of them are paper. And then we've got sort of gold leaf on Japanese paper, which you can see as the sparkly bits are, and there's some embroidery on it too. So embroidery. All these little, can you see that? The red line.
Yeah.
And then a inlaid veneer wooden ladder. That's the top of the ladder. So that piece there.
So this is a work of love.
Yeah.
This
and an exhibition piece, basically.
definitely looks like a lot of
Yeah.
work.
I did think, what am I doing when I was starting? So actually, I remember vividly, this is one of the ones I was working on in the temporary studio room at the far end. I think that was, this board will remind me of being in that room. Sort of each board kind of, I can remember where I was when I was doing it. So yeah, that's a variety. And then another one I did recently, which is similar in some ways to the feathers, is it was a book of wildflowers. So that's all embroidered. Petals.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will continue doing these. I can't stop now. And they're my, you know, you could say my most valuable sort of possession, because I, you know, if I have ever lost them, God forbid, you know, I'd never be able to replace it. Because, and actually, I will just show quickly, because they're not always sample boards. Some are little sample books. So this one, which you had on one of your Facebook,
Yeah,
the image of holding it. This is sort of a duplicate copy of the same book, so it's blank inside. But because it's a miniature, and I wanted to test out the structure, I made a complete sort of duplicate book.
so it was the first one.
So this, yeah, I did this alongside actually the real one.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it has its own little wooden box. So I asked the guy who makes boxes to just do two. So I thought it would be nice just to have a box for it to sit in.
Yeah, that definitely shows a lot of dedication to the craft and to your projects, because I can't even imagine that I'll be spending so much additional time alongside or before or after I completed a whole bookbinding project to create a board, which obviously would remind me about the project, but still it's a lot of time, and that's very impressive.
But it is a part of your process. This is how you work.
It is, yeah. I mean, I've done it since the book one, and probably had I not been doing a gold tooling course at the time with Tracy Rowledge, and she said it's really useful to do a sample board for each of your books. So I did one for the very first binding and just kept on. I wouldn't have started it, you know, I wouldn't have had this record. And photographs are great, but this is a physical record that I can show people, and people can hold them and feel them and sort of, yeah, you know, hold them in the light and so forth. So I think, yeah, it's something that I've got to continue. I have to keep going with them now.
And how did people react to this collection when you presented it at the conference? Because it looks like an exhibition material. You really need to show these things to people.
Yeah, I think everyone thought I was kind of mad. Why did you spend all that time doing it? But it was actually, I'd never seen them. It's funny because I've seen them in the box, but I'd never actually laid them all out together, which I did to sort of ahead of cataloguing them. And then obviously the presentation in the lecture theatre, the whole point of me taking them along was I wanted to be able to spread them out as far as possible. And I'd no idea how much space 62 boards would take. And actually, it was quite a lot, to allow the people the space to move around. And I was quite willing for people to take photographs and pick them up, because that's, you know, kind of the whole point of them. I think that they need to be held and touched. And my embroidery, I think I've developed it since the sort of initial boards I did, and I try and make sure that any long stitches that I do are caught down, so they're not sort of then they hopefully won't get caught. So all the long stitches on, for example, the feathers I use a couching stitch. So you do a long stitch, and then you go back along the thread and sort of catch it down with tiny little stitches on the top, which also means you can potentially curve the line of thread if you leave enough extra to allow for a curve. And I try not to, now if I'm designing a book, I try not to do too much embroidery across the leather joint, because obviously boards are going to be moving at that point. So I think, I'm developing as I go along, based on experiences I've had with books in the past.
And have you tried any new techniques recently? I mean, embroidery techniques, or is your repertoire fixed by now?
Pretty much. I mean, kind of trying to, I've seen some beautiful things on social media, people, really calling it kind of painting with thread, which I suppose I was trying to do a bit more with the feathers, is sort of to try and sort of tone in the colors. So it was kind of, it looks almost like it. What I'm actually really interested to try, based on that, is to see how it would look, is to embroider something entirely in white thread and then paint over the top. Is just to see, rather than graduating the thread colors, something I'd be interested to experiment with is painting, as I say, all in white, and then painting over the top so the thread takes the color. So you still have the, you're not having to change sort of thread colors. It's just something I've been thinking about. I haven't had time to experiment, but something I'd quite like to see what happens.
You mentioned when we were talking about documenting your projects, you mentioned photographing. Where should I put the emphasis here in this word? Anyway, making photographs of your projects, and that's something I wanted to focus more a bit, because if any beginner bookbinders or any other artisans are watching us, it's definitely important to start documenting your projects from the very beginning. And I'm so very happy that I made photos of the first book I ever made in 2006, and now I can see all the errors and mistakes I made, and I can discuss that. I can show it to other people. I can see things that I done right, which is even more impressive and fun. And you can see your progress. You can see how ideas evolved over the years. So yeah, if you are starting any sort of craft or any creative process in your life, make a lot of photos, make notes, document your projects. That's really important. And it's not even about 20 years later. Just in a couple of years, just when couple years pass, you will be grateful that you've been documenting your projects.
Yeah, definitely.
And also getting back to the coloring, we should probably answer the question that we had about natural dyes like woad, weld, madder, or mushroom dyes. Now, mushroom dyes I've never heard of. Have you tried any of those techniques, or do you always buy your threads?
No, I've never dyed thread, actually. Not because I don't want to try, but it's another thing that would take time to practice with. And at the moment, like I say, I can get threads in whatever color I want. I'm very lucky, actually. In Shepton Mallet, where I live, there is a haberdashery shop. They're few and far between now, but I literally 10 minutes up the road I can go, and they've got the whole, they have the whole bank of sort of thread reels, and you can choose what particular tone you want. And so I keep meaning to take up all the threads I've got, in a big box, and then identify, because it's impossible to try and imagine a color at home, walk to the shop, and then try and find it, because it's just like, then you see entire color. So what I need to do is cross-reference actually ones I've got against ones they've got, and buy the ones I'm missing. So I need to do that. So no, I haven't done thread dyeing before. It's not something I won't do, but I haven't needed to yet.
Now you have a sink.
Now I have a sink, yes. I don't like dyeing in general, actually, but yes, now I have a sink. There's no excuse.
You just need to get some time.
Yes,
that's the main issue.
And with these more painterly of your embroideries, I assume there are many more colors used.
Yeah, multiple colors, and actually that's one of the trickier things about having a few projects on at the same time, is a couple of my projects I think need sort of a few of the same thread colors, so it's just remembering which ones I've chosen for which project, and kind of going from there, sort of sharing them between the sample boards, finding, you know, them in, because I'm trying to keep, I've got at the moment, I've got my table and I've got the boxes with the different sort of all the stuff that I've been creating in each box for each project. But yeah, the threads need to hop across sometimes, depending on what I'm working on at the time. Actually, I just wanted quickly to go back to what you were saying about the photo references as well, because I think you briefly mentioned that you wanted to ask about the work I did for DB. So I do the sort of social media and promotion for DB, and at the moment they're about to do the 4 fellows.
Sorry, we should probably say DB is Designer Bookbinders.
Yeah, Designer Bookbinders is the society in the UK, and Designer Bookbinders each year are associated with the Booker Prize, which is a prize for fiction, and the shortlist of 6 books was announced on the 6th of September. So now the 6 fellows have been of the fellows of the society, of which there's about 30, have nominated themselves to do a book this year. So they each have their texts now. So as part of the process, I've asked them to try and take work in progress photographs that we can share once the bindings have been awarded in October to the authors of the books. So that was just another thing I wanted to say about sort of, yeah, the importance of trying to document your work.
Well, sure, it does make good content, and we as fans of your work and of the work of other members of Designer Bookbinders, we really like those snippets on Instagram and on Facebook. And I don't know, does it help you documenting the process, not just the finished product?
So my own personal documentation.
Yeah,
it does. I mean, probably less so at the time when I'm like, oh, why do I always write a blog post? It takes such a long time. But actually, it's really, really helpful for me to then sort of a few months later, oh, how did I do that again? Or how can I explain to a student how I did that? And I can say, well, actually, I've written about it. And you can look here. And I think that's really vitally important for me going ahead to have documented it at the time. So I mean, my phone is full of kind of fairly boring images to you know, to some people, but actually I'm like, well, actually that really helpful photograph, it might not show very much to someone else, but to me I can remember how I've done that looking back at this image. So yeah, I'll always again try and do a blog post now for each of the bindings I do.
And especially as we're living in the digital world nowadays, I'm always sort of saddened by the fact that there are quite a few bookbinders who make really nice bindings, but they either don't have Instagram accounts at all, or they don't post good photos of their books on their Instagram accounts, which is, I guess, even more upsetting. So yeah, document your projects and post them online. That will bring happiness to a lot of people around you.
Yeah. I mean, I think just going back quickly to the Booker Prize, it's an intensely short period of time that they have to produce a book in. It's 5 or 6 weeks. So I can understand how some binders forget to take photographs because you're just like, I need to get this done, I don't have any time. So it's trying to remind people along the way that actually, you know, it's a useful thing. But I can't imagine at the moment having to try and do a book within 6 weeks, but I suppose needs must, you know, if it's, and they have to have an understudy as well in case they get ill for any reason, because they need 6 books to be available on the night of the award ceremony. Yeah. So that's important.
And if any one of our viewers, current or future, is interested in more info about these bindings made for Booker Prize, we had 2 series dedicated to this topic during 2 different years, and we talked to several of bookbinders who made these bindings, and they talk a lot about the stress of the project when you need to make a book a month or so, or 1 month and a half or something like that. And that's really interesting insight into the process of bookbinding, stressful bookbinding as well.
Yeah, including one case when an understudy was invoked. Yeah, well, I forget who was it who had to finish another bookbinder's project.
Kate Holland.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. One, actually, I won't say who said to me, but one binder, one of the fellows I was talking to told me her top tip, and that was you can start binding the book and you put plain end papers on, and then you can continue with the binding while you're still reading the text block, so that you can sort of get ahead of the game. And then, you know, if you've got plain end papers on, you can get ahead with the binding without sort of potentially waiting sort of until you've got your design idea. I thought that was quite a good idea.
Interesting. Tips and tricks of doing book binding.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Berfo Nakar. Is there a book about bookbinding you recommend for beginners? Maybe something you recommend to your students, or just your favorite book for beginners? Anything?
Sure. I've got 2 books which I'd recommend, and that is, I don't actually know what it's called, but there's a book by Jen Lindsay, and I've got it down there. I don't know the title. Maybe you can look it up.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really good, clear step-by-step guide of fine binding.
Fine bookbinding, a technical guide, or?
Yeah, that sounds right. It's sort of a grey cover and a yellow spine.
Yeah. That's the one.
And additionally, again, I don't know the name of it, Arthur Johnson. I have his book, and I especially turn to that one because I always forget how to start off my sewing my headbands. So I've got a permanent bookmark in the page for that. Arthur Johnson Bookbinding Techniques or something like that.
There is a practical guide to craft bookbinding.
Probably that. It's sort of a grey
back from the 80s.
Yeah, it's an old book. Yeah.
Arthur Johnson.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be more traditional. Perhaps.
Oh yeah. Obviously, yeah. I know this book as well.
I think you have it.
Yeah.
I think I saw it at your place. Yeah.
I think I have more than one.
I mean, that's not exhaustive, of course. There's plenty of other books there, but there are 2 that I particularly do turn to for my paste recipe and my in Jen Lindsay's book, and starting headbands, sewn headbands off.
Do you think that bookbinding books, tutorial books, still have a place in education? When you can find so many video tutorials online?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually watching someone doing something on a screen is probably more helpful than sort of trying to piece your way through instructional diagrams, probably. But I think, you know, there are definitely reasons for having reference books. I mean, obviously, it's, you know, something like Jen Lindsay, you're not trying to sort of pause your video every step you've done. You know, you can work through it page by page to sort of, or, you know, look back to certain techniques. So yeah, I'm sure there's a place for both, really. I was thinking I should watch more instructional videos. I saw I know Glenn Malkin's doing quite a lot. I don't imagine I'm ever gonna film any myself. I just, perhaps for embroidery, I don't know. But I think it's, I should watch more myself too. But then there's, you know, again, like I was saying with, you know, spreading the work around and asking people to do stuff, there's a limit to how much more I want to sort of put on myself to learn at the moment. I sort of need to just get on with what I've got, what I've got on the bench, rather than trying to learn anything new.
And what about recording educational videos yourself? Have you ever thought about making a whole course, perhaps?
I haven't. I mean, it's a time thing as well as anything else. You have to be so prepared. I mean, I suppose in some ways I see my blog as being that for me, you know, written instructions. I was filmed for the first time for the Suntop Editions project by a videographer, and there was no speaking or anything, but just the preparation that had to go into sort of preparing for that, with all the step-by-step points was it's a big challenge actually, and I don't see myself as a sort of performer. Doing the presentation for the Society of Bookbinders was not something I feel that comfortable doing necessarily. I mean, I was fine. I had a script and that helped. But I suppose if you really know what you're talking about, then if you're being filmed on something, you know your subject, then it's sort of easy, really.
I wanted to add a couple of things about the bookbinding tutorials, and firstly, in my personal experience, and one of the first books I used quite a lot, and I love it, was a Soviet bookbinding tutorial for schools. So I cannot recommend it to anyone because it's in Russian, obviously. But it was an amazing book because it also had sketches of all the tools you need. So how to make a knife, how to make a rotary knife, presses, anything, sewing frames. So some of my first tools I've made by following the sketches in this tutorial. But then at some moment I got a tutorial by Josep Campras. He's a bookbinder and bookbinding teacher from Barcelona, and we had him on our podcast some time ago. It's in Spanish but with English subtitles, so you can watch it. What I was very impressed. It's a very visual guide. It's a very visual tutorial. There are lots of amazing photos there, and that's something that is different when you compare tutorials from I'd say first 3 quarters of the 20th century and before that, and the tutorials that are published nowadays. Because before the photos were almost always they were awful and quite you weren't able to see any details, and you had to deduct quite a lot from mixing the description and images, and even then it wasn't always easy to do that. And the other thing I wanted to mention, and it isn't a plug in any way, but I was quite impressed by tutorials made by Ben Elbow for his bindings. So with his project Bookbinding Out of the Box, because there is a whole team of people working there. They have published something like 7 or 8 tutorials already. And they are quite expensive. So a set costs something like 70 or 80 euros. But the set includes materials you need to make the book, and I'll post a link in the comments as well. But his tutorials are absolutely amazing and so easy to follow, even for the hardest structures. He's amazing. So sorry, but it's probably not a beginner's level stuff. But if you want to see tutorials that are really thought through for the person on the other side to follow without any additional questions and problems, that's like golden standard of tutorials in my opinion.
Yeah.
So there are a couple more questions, and I should say that we will be finishing our live stream pretty soon because it's almost an hour and a half, and we need to let Hannah go do her stuff. So if you have any last questions, that's your chance to ask them. Alessia Tumbiolo, hello from the UK. Then Suhasini Deokar, sorry if I pronounced the name wrong. Please start online internship program on bookmaking art. That's a great idea, and I should say that we at iBookBinding have some thoughts had some discussions and thoughts about starting some sort of online program, and that's not an easy thing to do. And we have some plans, but probably not even for 2023. Maybe for a bit later, because we need many more resources to do that. Much more money. And iBookBinding needs to grow a bit before we can start anything like that. But maybe some other bookbinders will start online courses or something like that. And there are some online courses, but not many of them. Do you know any good online courses, Hannah?
I don't. No, actually, and it's something that it would be useful to. I mean, I'm sure there's are loads, but it's not something I am familiar with because I go along in my own little bubble doing my thing and haven't found the time to look into such things yet. So no, I'm not sure. I mean, there are people doing sort of YouTube videos, which is great, but I'm sure there's people doing more that I expect I know about, but offhand, I'm not sure.
We had a discussion with quite recently. I'm blanking. Pavel, maybe you can help me with the person who does gold tooling in the United States.
I'm very bad with names.
That's so bad. Okay, well, it will come to me. But yeah, we had recently talked to a person who is doing online courses on gold tooling, and we just that's so bad. Sorry, but yeah, I guess you can find it on our YouTube channel. Anyway. Patricia Vignoli asks, Pavel, why don't you translate the Soviet book? Well, maybe
that would be a very niche product. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's easy to get copyright for the translation or something, especially now. It's really tricky to work with any Russian objects of copyright or anything nowadays. So anything else, Pavel?
Well, I think this is it.
Yeah.
We are precisely 90 minutes for a change.
Okay. Anyway, sorry for blanking on this project. How can it be possible that I can't find it? We did live stream, right? No? Don't remember.
No idea. It could have been a recorded interview.
Okay. Anyway, that was a great talk. Many thanks to Hannah for joining us today and showing a lot of stuff and her workshop and some of the projects and talking about all of that. Thank you. We really hope to see you again, maybe as we discussed, for just to discuss one of your one of the books that's currently in work when it's ready. So we'll wait for Instagram photos and then we'll probably reach out to you again. I wanted to mention that next time we will probably be streaming without a guest, but we have. So our researcher done some work on the bookish objects of the Rings of Power series that are loosely based on Lord of the Rings books, and we are probably going to discuss this next week and some other things as well. So stay tuned and join us next week. Please check the links in the description of Hannah's website and Instagram and other places when she posts her work, and obviously our accounts as well. Subscribe. Please check our Patreon account because, well, money coming from our patrons allow us to pay for this research that we will use next week and for editing of the videos of our podcast and our live streams. Pledges are not high. They start with only €1 per month, but we're always happy to see any person to pledge more. Thanks for staying with us, and hope to see all of you next time in a week. Bye.
Bye.
And as usual, we'll stay for a minute longer because there is a delay between the moment when we stop